How's it going, everyone? I'm going to try to keep this brief, unlike my book title and my chapter title. So, Innovations and Implications of Persuasive Narrative. Chapter 11 is called Responding to Video Game Moral Panic, Persuasive Messaging in the Video Games Industry's Response to the News Coverage of Mass Violence. So, whenever mass violence or school shooting happens, video games are often considered a contributing cause. So when Columbine happened in 1999, Bill Clinton called for an investigation into the marketing of violent entertainment. 63% of adults blamed entertainment. 83 were in favor of restricting sale of violent media to children. 57 blamed the lack of awareness and treatment for mental health issues, and 28 believed it was a reflection of poor regulations on gun control laws. So one of my takeaways from this is kind of the shift in culture because I think more than 57% would blame mental health or lack of treatment for mental health issues because I think mental health is something that we're more open to talking about now. But it's real interesting that 28% blame gun control laws when I'm curious what that would be now with gun control still being such a pretty big issue. This chapter also talks about narrative transportation theory. So, narrative transportation theory is when there's a process or a story and it creates empathy and mental imagery, and then the person loses track of reality. So my takeaways from this are kind of the Feed the Children or Sarah McLachlan dog commercial, to where when there's empathy involved and there's a visual and you want to it pulls at your heartstrings and you want to make a difference, you can get sucked into that commercial and lose track of reality. I also think of authors and podcasters, the best storytellers are great at using adjectives and linking them to your senses. So you can walk into a room and see a blue chair, or the person walks outside and feels the cold air on their neck, or they describe the taste of the food that a person is eating. When they link adjectives to senses, it really pulls you out of where you're at and helps you lose track of reality and get drawn into their story. But I think the obvious kind of example here is video games. I think that narrative transportation theory is kind of when you play a video game and you get sucked into the video game, you lose track of time, and you're like, you had no idea that you're playing video games that long. I think another example of that would be bingeable shows on Netflix. Moral panic. So it was really interesting to see the breakdown of moral panic because it's something that we see often today, but it broke it down pretty well. Moral panic is created by news, public, politicians, and action groups. And there's more of that today than there was before because those four platforms have a louder voice. So the magic recipe for moral panic to happen would one be a threat to social values. Two, the threat is easily recognizable. Three, public concern naturally builds. And four, public figures and celebrities weigh in. So this is pretty much spot on. You can see these things happen sequentially whenever something happens and it turns into moral panic. It's often that these four steps happen in that order. But overall, the book kind of talks about when a school shooting happens, where is the blame being placed and how do they respond? So the news and media will blame the National Rifle Association. They'll blame gun control laws, the NRA. The NRA will often take that blame and shift it towards video games and say these kids are playing violent video games and they're taking in violent media, and that's why they're doing these actions. And then what's really interesting is that video games don't come out and have a lot of responses. They're not very boisterous because video games believe that there's no connection between the shootings and violent video games. So if every time a shooting happened and they came out with a statement, they would become part of the narrative. So they're more silent than they are outgoing when it comes to defending themselves whenever they're accused of being linked to these school shootings. So I'm curious what you guys think when it comes to video games being quiet rather than getting out there and having their voice be heard when it comes to them being blamed for school shootings and violent incidents. Thanks.